sense to us to begin at the beginning. In this case, to start the project with a story that looked at younger students. We didn't want something that was just promising or, ambiguous in what it was doing. And what we saw at White Center, we felt that it was sufficiently impressive to launch the series with. Critical factor is the data that was available. We really want to be able to scrutinize these programs that we're writing about, so there has to be sufficient data that could be state test scores and changes in those scores. It could be graduation rates, attendance figures, whatever it is. There has to be enough to show that there's real progress is being made. We might spend a fair amount of time reporting out a story, only to decide, after a week or two, this data it's just too squishy. It's just, there's not enough there. So, we need to move on. We didn't want to focus on a program that was expensive, that would be prohibitive for any other district. If that's the case, it just doesn't meet our criteria. It has to be something that another district might look at and say, that's interesting, we could do that. By and large, these stories are quite similar to other just thoroughly reported stories that we do. They're not intended to be light-hearted stories. We want these stories to have a lot of heft to them. In part to just tell the story in different ways and appeal to as many readers as we can. This is something we kind of struggled with in this story, was finding the sweet spot between focusing on, the person who's bringing about the change and the change itself. In this case, there was a particularly strong leader involved in making these changes happen, but we really tried to make it as much as we could about what the changes were, the programs, what these teachers did, the impact she had on the teachers to help them make these changes happen. These are not whodunits, but howdunnits, how certain people made these changes happen and the impact that they could have on the students. There's a lot of infrastructure that had to get created, and hiring that we did, even as we're also trying to scope out stories. It was working on so many different tracks at the same time, I think, was one of the challenges. There's no blueprint for this, really. There were some pretty good notions about what we wanted to do, but no real prototype. Readers were expressing they were just grateful to see something like this. I feel like there's a hunger out there for these kinds of stories that do some hard reporting around solutions, that identify them and really, analyze them and, talk in some detail about how they came about, what the hurdles were, that, really gauge and measure what they're accomplishing.